Welcome back to the Alts Podcast. I'm your host, Horacio Ruiz. We bring you industry leaders and creators to give their insights on the rapidly changing and exciting world of alternative assets. Opinions expressed on this podcast by the host and podcast guests are for informational purposes only and should not be considered investment advice. Podcast hosts and guests may maintain positions in the offerings discussed in this podcast. The intro song, Fishing for Pets, is written and composed by Alan Goldshire from his latest release, Live at the Lakeview Lounge. Thank you for joining the podcast. Today's guest is Eric Witschen, the CEO of Neustreet. We go everywhere in this episode, starting with NFTs, crypto talk, Pokemon, and other collectibles like baseball cards and wine. Eric is a data guru and is implementing his skills to put Neustreet on the front end of becoming a marketplace aggregator. I hope you enjoy my conversation with Eric. All right, guys. So thanks for joining me on the podcast. We have a great guest today, someone that apparently we're going to talk NFTs today with Eric. He's the CEO of Neustreet. Eric, thank you for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, very, very much my pleasure.
Yeah, dude. So, you mentioned that you are a big NFT collector before we came on, and that piqued my interest. And you said you were collecting baseball cards as well. But I guess let's begin from the beginning, or not, or just kind of how you got into being a collector and how that's kind of guided you now that you are leading Neustreet and all the things that you're doing over there.
Yeah, sure. So, that's probably the most fundamental thing I am as a collector. I think that through my life, it's the most common thread. But started out in the 80s as a baseball card collector, as every 80s kid in the U.S. did. I started collecting cards, but that evolved when I was actually my first job on Wall Street to essentially collecting the watches and the wine and art and stuff that's more centric to that world. But essentially I love to research things. So, for example, just to highlight my collector, the ends of the world that I'll go to, I don't drink alcohol, but I'm one of the biggest wine collectors I know. Because I just get really fascinated in understanding these things, where they come from, what their historical significance is. And also I think that all these things are, when you look at collecting and investing and gambling, and it's all so similar. But anyway, we'll get into that. But so I, in the last couple of years, as you mentioned, have been collecting NFTs. I'm also a blockchain technologist, so I kind of saw these things coming around actually from a completely different viewpoint. I saw them as I was working on a food supply chain project that used NFT technology to track from the cow to the burger type of thing. Yeah. And then they started putting JPEGs in the NFTs. I was like, holy crap, this changes everything. So I was pretty early collecting NFTs. I actually wasn't really early on things like CryptoPunks, but I got in there eventually. I started out my NFT collecting career primarily on Super Rare. So Super Rare is a platform for fine digital art. I was one of the early collectors on that. I acquired a lot of really interesting pieces, and it just sort of spiraled from there. Eventually found CryptoPunks. I own a few of them. I was very early on the Artifact, train. I actually collected their first NFT ever. So I own the Cyber Sneaker. And I've maintained friendship with the team. So I've collected a lot of things that they have. I'm a big clone holder, a big believer in what they're doing in that ecosystem. But yeah, that's pretty much me as a collector. And then in my professional career, I run Neustreet. And Neustreet is essentially a media and data company, sort of like Bloomberg is to the financial markets. Neustreet is to the collectibles markets. And so, ultimately trying to make it easier for collectors to find where they can buy certain items. So you'll be able to come to Neustreet and you'll be able to see where I can buy a certain card or sneaker or NFT or something like that across marketplaces. And so just trying to simplify things for the user journey. That's ultimately near and dear to my heart, obviously.
Yeah, so much to unpack there. Let's go back to the NFTs, right?
Yeah.
What so you had an early exposure to it. It was kind of you talk about the blockchain, and it was being used for a practical purpose, right? Tracking.
NFTs are technology vehicles. I see them truly as that. It could hold media, it could hold code. It doesn't really matter. I'm talking about people in my private life. using NFT technology to govern free on board shipping loans are for international, shipping. It's just like this stuff is such a technology vehicle. It is truly going to rebuild the internet. I mean, that's like fundamentally true in my heart. Understanding what I do about finance and the internet and technology, I truly think it will. So yeah, I started out very much like from a technology standpoint, and then when you see a technology like NFTs evolve, and then you see people start to do creative things around them. Now you've got the initial building blocks of the internet combined with digital renaissance. It's like, you can't, in my opinion, and again, this is not financial advice or anything of the sort, but I'm a big believer in NFTs. Things got overheated, but every nascent market does.
Yeah. Right? And so but to hear like your enthusiasm with it, right? Like you see that a lot of people have been in the space and maybe now, they're a little bit quieter, or they're kind of, there's a lot of talk about how people are disappearing from the space. And I don't know if that's true or not. But I guess my question is, despite this downturn, right? And despite the fact that, the JPEGs themselves, the NFTs, that they can be so volatile with price. You think that these are still they're viable long-term, culturally significant items to hold on to?
I think certain ones are and certain ones aren't. Just like anything, right? There's like, there's going to be a lot of worthless JPEGs. I'm not going to lie. Probably 95+% of the supply currently on the market is absolutely worthless. And that's a hard pill to swallow, right? But if you look at things like CryptoPunks, squiggles, things that are like the OGs of OG items that truly represent an art form. I think that those ones are here forever. You start to look into like Bored Ape Yacht Club. I think Bored Ape Yacht Club is great. I think that they have likely a long-term future. But then if you get beyond that, it's kind of like, well, what utility needs to be offered to this community in order to let it survive, and what does that cost? And then you start to look at how much does it cost to run a business. It's a lot. It's like, you don't want to, I want art. I don't want a business. I don't want utility. So anyway, I think that this latest downturn has been welcoming to me, to be honest with you, because there's just too much scams, too much fraud, too much people coming in thinking that they're going to make riches overnight, which just doesn't happen. And so it got overheated. It came crashing down. It's like the 99, 2000, 2001 internet situation. I truly fundamentally believe we're seeing a new internet being born.
And it's being digitally represented, right, with art in a lot of ways.
Well, yeah, a digital representation. The whole point of this whole thing is that digital scarcity, we've been taught since the internet was born, because the way file systems essentially evolved, saving things on the computer, copying, pasting, that stuff is just like, it's sort of just the way that the databases were chosen to, to work, right? So we've got it ingrained in our brain that things that are digital have no value. Now, that's because, like, when I copy and paste something, I don't necessarily know which is the original file. I can copy and paste it 1,000 times and necessarily not necessarily know what the original file is. Now you inject blockchain technology and public ledger and minting and provenance. And for the first time in history, you have digital scarcity and true digital provenance. And that's everything. If people don't understand, if people come away with this conversation with everything, understand that is what, digital scarcity, digital provenance, those things really matter. And ultimately give digital things value. And that's a big thing. Anyway, I don't even know what the question was, but that's the question I answered.
No, that's awesome. And we've covered that. Provenance, digital scarcity, blockchain technology, all that stuff. And it's just a matter of it getting out there and really becoming more mainstream.
Right.
And in some ways it's worked, in some ways it hasn't, right? In some ways people are still, you need to make it still easier, right? In some ways there's still barriers to access this technology.
Oh, it's a pain in the ass in a lot of cases. Yeah. I truly fundamentally believe that, the success of this industry depends on you not knowing it exists.
Mm-hmm.
It will get eventually integrated into front ends of UIs, and things that are important transactionally or otherwise will run through a blockchain when you click it, and things that aren't important transactionally won't.
Right.
They'll be stored in a normal database.
Yeah.
It's just that's success, and ultimately UI UX is the next wave of adoption. I know enough in my personal life. I also am a GP at a semi-private venture firm. And so, we see a lot of things that come across, and one thing is clear is everybody is trying to solve this problem right Everybody's got this big bag of expensive JPEGs or cryptocurrency, and you know what? damn them if they're going to let them all go to zero.
That's a good point. That is a good point. They've got a stake in the game, right? Let's connect that, because you talked about collecting cards and the user experience, and to me, the holy grail still, despite their mistakes that they've made and kind of the lack of kind of momentum that they have right now, NBA Top Shot. That's something that to me exemplifies that, right? Like they got a cool product, and you don't know that you're not really transacting with the blockchain there, right? You're just buying packs of cards.
Yeah, the fatal flaw of NBA Top Shot is they didn't understand what and I'm going to get shit for this, but they didn't understand what they were doing. I mean, they built a UI UX on top of a blockchain that nobody fucking uses. And so it's one of those things that, like, okay, great, you can solve the problems of Ethereum by going and building Flow. And this is not an NBA Top Shot at all. This is actually CryptoKitties, and this is, previous to this, but essentially the inception for Flow. Yes, you can build great UI UX on a blockchain that was created for those purposes. Of course. It's harder to work with things that are more in the public. But ultimately what happened is NBA Top Shot could be so much more successful than it is, in my opinion, if it were something that would be able to be bridged to Ethereum. Because when you think about it, right, it doesn't matter that, or that you could essentially, use as a financial. I mean, these JPEGs are worthless without the attachment to other things that have value, right? You can only slosh around it in your own ecosystem for so long, and it worked that way. And literally, like, by having sort of your own captive, ecosystem for NFTs, it kind of defeats the whole purpose of Web3 and what we're doing here. I mean, I don't fundamentally understand it. I don't think it was the right decision, but I mean, I think it harmed the long-term value of the project. And I don't know if it would, and I'm sure that it's going to be a great value to buy at some point in time. But I've not really been too high on Top Shot personally, because of the fact that it doesn't exist on a blockchain that exists with the rest of my money and the rest of my things.
So is that kind of what maybe the Bored Ape Yacht Club is trying to do when they had this Otherside release, right? And then everything crashed. People were paying crazy amounts of money in gas fees.
That's an interesting. We can go into that. I mean, I can talk very deeply about.
Give me something about that.
I'm not sure. So essentially, like when you look at the Otherside drop, and you look at Ethereum, and you look at the way things were done, I think there was some intention, personally, by Yuga's overlords to essentially try and foster a narrative that a new layer one needed to be created. Because other layer ones that had been invested in by these same entities were failing. I won't go into too much detail on that, but that's a fundamental. I think it's something that I get to be careful to say. But anyway, so I mean, I think that, like, dropping on Ethereum in the way that they dropped it, any fucking idiot in the world would have known how that would have gone.
Right. Yeah.
Like, so first of all, the contract was a piece of shit. It was written like crap, and it was not gas optimized. The whole plan was not gas optimized. They had more wallets whitelisted than they pretended to have. They knew this was going to crush Ethereum and bring it to its knees. Meanwhile, as a technologist, it frustrates the hell out of me, because if you're going to use Ethereum, everybody fucking knows at this point you should be using a layer 2 for this kind of a thing. And so, like, maybe it might have been too early at the time to use a layer 2 like Arbitrum or Optimism or something like that, but I don't think it was. And them coming out after the drop and saying that maybe they need a new layer 1 to move off Ethereum, good luck. I mean, you move off Ethereum and, I don't know. It's the same thing, sloshing around. You slosh around in your own ecosystem. You better be bridgeable. It better play well with others, and it better not be a plan to co-opt the new world of finance, like the previous iteration was.
Can you go a little deeper into that, because I'm more familiar with the layer ones, like talking about Ethereum, comfortable with that.
Absolutely.
A layer 2. What is a layer 2?
So layer 1 you can think about as a settlement layer. Like, so eventually in the future, people won't be interacting with Ethereum. Applications will be interacting with Ethereum.
Okay.
When you think about applications on Ethereum, there are applications that do specific things, and there are applications that essentially batch transactions and interact with Ethereum like you're interacting with Ethereum, but you're not. Like so. So in other words, it's hard to get into too much of a deep. I don't want to get into too much technical details because it gets really weird really quick. But essentially, you think about the Ethereum settlement layer sort of in the middle, and then you think about on the outside all the users of that layer. And so you've got OpenSea that's using it, but then you've got other users like Arbitrum, and Arbitrum is a layer 2. Optimism is a layer 2. And so essentially what that means is you can interact with this sort of like you're interacting with Ethereum, and it shares the name or sort of your not the ENS name, but essentially the address for Ethereum. And so there's not a lot of risk like there is with sort of cross-chain bridging, like you see with Wormhole and Solana and all that stuff. But essentially layer 2s, what they fundamentally do is they take all the transactions and they send them to Ethereum in a batch. So if I'm interacting with Arbitrum, you're interacting with Arbitrum, and 100,000 people are interacting with Arbitrum at once, they'll be batching transactions and essentially sending them and settling on Ethereum in a much more efficient way, which saves tons of gas. And so I can do Ethereum transactions on Arbitrum and otherwise for a couple cents. I can send hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars for pennies through those networks. And with the so that's what a layer 2 is, essentially a scaling solution or an application that batches transactions to Ethereum. And that's how everything's eventually going to be.
You're basically saying that, and just to take it back to this, the other side drop, right? Like if the programmers really wanted to, they could have easily programmed it that way and saved
a layer 2 or a better, even the contract itself, when you look at how the contract was written, it wasn't written to save gas. It's just like, you see these things and you're like, okay, well, you didn't have either a very good developer, writing the smart contract or you eventually, I don't know. I don't want to point fingers, but essentially the end result of it was that the contract was not gas optimized. The plan was not gas optimized. And essentially you could have seen it coming a million miles away. I minted my couple plots, I had them. I don't know if I still have them or not. I probably do. But layer 2s essentially help solve this problem. Layer 2s might not have been as evolved. Maybe somebody that's so technologically deep as myself, would think would think, yes, it's a no-brainer, and maybe the rest of the world wouldn't. But truly, you need to be consulting people that do know what they're talking about. And I think that for the billions and billions of dollars that you've raised, you've got those people. Like who are you listening to and getting this advice from that is as bad as it is? Because I'm a phone call away. Please, me and a lot of other people in this industry would happily help or point you in the right direction. I'm not saying that I know everything about it, all this stuff at all. I'm not a Solidity developer hardcore. I know enough to be dangerous, but I know people that do, and so I rely on them. So anyway, and then something interesting, there's a layer 0 as well. We won't even go into that, but there's some interesting things with layer 0s that when you think about it, Ethereum could be part of a layer 0. It kind of can be used by layer 0, and there's interesting things there. But in the current layer 1, just to tie it in a bow, in the current layer 1 ecosystem, it's hard to see Ethereum not being a winner in the next cycle, at least.
For sure. Yeah. Wow. And, I had to take that side, and I kind of want to, go move on as well. But to me, that drop really kind of was the symbol for kind of like the beginning of the end of the last wave. Ever since that drop.
Yeah. Oh, it definitely was. It was a top signal. It was the end of. It was a perfectly timed drop. It was in terms of at least capturing revenue for Yuga and the other side and Animoca. But I just think it could have been done better. And all the negativity that I share here, Yuga's done a lot of real good, and Animoca's done a lot of real good for this industry. And I can be critical about it from a standpoint of tough love.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of things that are done there. But at the end of the day, Monday morning quarterback is strong.
I hear you. Yeah.
I gotta give credit where credit's due. That shit. Yeah. This shit is hard.
Yeah. They've absolutely executed something incredible, and it's hard to think, but it's less than a year and a half old, right? Like they built this empire.
It's crazy to think about. Yeah, having owned apes and mutants and land and all that stuff, and it's just crazy to think about what it was like a year ago.
Yeah, it really is. I want to go dive into Neustreet a little bit. I kind of want to talk about, you have a phrase there or kind of a saying, collect wisely. And I love that because it kind of, the collect wisely, it acknowledges the passion that collectors have, but it also that wisely kind of, throws in that investment, right? And obviously all collectors want to collect what they're passionate about, but they also want to collect in a way that they know that they're not throwing their money away, right? Tell me what that embodies. Tell me what that means for Neustreet.
It's so true. I mean, that's the thing is like, when you get a lot of backlash as a collector if you financialize these things, right? It's like, oh my God, my precious Pokemon cards, you don't, these aren't stocks and all that stuff. But at the end of the day, you need to know how much they're worth because you don't have unlimited money. Nobody does. And even if you're never going to sell these things, you still need to be smart about what you're buying because you have a finite amount of resources. And so, I mean, collect wisely basically means that. It's like, you can hold on to these things forever. You can be passing them down to the next generation. You could be flipping them. It doesn't matter. Fundamentally, you still need to know what they're worth. And understanding what they're worth and providing the tools to the community that allow people to understand what things are worth, essentially is good for everybody. More liquidity. You look at it in financial markets of past. I worked at Bloomberg for a long time. I worked in other places. You see how financial markets sort of evolved from nascent to developed, and you always see the kicking and screaming that happens when it comes to transparency. Oh no, I'm going to lose my oligopoly or my monopoly. And what ends up happening is once things are liberated and things are more fluid, if you're actually good at what you do, you'll make more money. And so standing on your own credibility and merits the things that should be happening, not essentially, just SEO tricks or whatnot. And so like one of the reasons why I built Neustreet is because, as a collector, I was going through and I was collecting baseball cards. I was buying a Ricky Henderson rookie card because I never could afford it as a kid. And I went and I bought it. And then, what I observed was that eBay is still there, very much in force. Yes, eBay is still there. They do a little bit better job, but they didn't change a ton about the experience. But you know what? I found the card that I wanted, and then I found another site. And then I found another site and I was like, oh, this is super interesting. I found Star Stock at the time and my stuff. And I was just like, this is so cool. It's like, I went and I bought the card on, I forget which marketplace. And then I found out the next day it was cheaper on yet another marketplace. And so I was like, basically built marketplace aggregation technology my entire career. Let's do it for things that I care about slightly more than stocks and bonds. Yeah. So ultimately, like I approach it very much from the standpoint of like price aggregation, transparency in pricing, price history, valuations. What are these things worth? What have they been worth in the past? What's the media around them? So essentially when you go back to that Bloomberg analogy, that's what we're trying to build. And we have to be methodical about it. And we have to get there with various orders of operation that are slightly different to the way Bloomberg came to light. But ultimately, at the end of the road, we are a media company, but a media aggregator as well, because we understand that collectors aren't just wanting to eat our dog food. They need to eat everybody's dog food. You need to do research outside of an insular system. And same thing with data. We will host other people's data, valuations. Our valuations may be good. Yours may be better. Come put it on our platform and let's see who prefers what. I mean, I'm definitely going to, stand on the, merits of our business and our backgrounds. But ultimately we approach this business very much purely and genuinely from the demand side, from the collector side. I'm a collector. Everybody that works with me are collectors. And we see problems and we ultimately just want to solve them. And I think that's really awesome to see what you guys do because I follow alts and I think you guys are very much approaching this same problem from a different angle. So, yeah. I mean, I love, I love it. I love it all. And I think that we've been taught as a kid that these items should not have value, right? Like, or shouldn't have a lot of value, right? It's another thing that we'll eventually look back on and laugh. But like I always actually ask, I'll turn this question to you, Horacio. What's the number one grossing entertainment franchise of all time?
Entertainment franchise. So I'm gonna have to say, from what I know, Pokemon.
You're right. You're right. You're right. You're dead right. But like you would understand that. But like most people, it would blow their mind. Yeah. I mean, but when you think about it, like I collected Pokemon cards as a kid. My brother, 5 years young. My daughter has a 7-year-old daughter sitting in this next room, has a Pokemon backpack. She collects Pokemon cards. That's not my influence at all. Literally, her entire class, half of the class brought Pokemon cards in for show and tell. You show me a better investment in the world than one of the original Charizard cards, as long as you're smart about the supply, which is another thing you have to understand. There's two things. There's price, but there's how many of these things are there. And if you can understand those two things, you're doing a pretty damn good job and a lot better than most people.
So I just had a couple of weeks ago, we had a guy, Jesus Garcia. He's a trading card game expert at Heritage Auctions. And he's the expert. He's the resident Pokemon expert. And I asked him, how is the industry right now? Like, how is Pokemon right now? He's like, it's stronger than ever.
Yeah.
And he's like, I got 5-6-year-old nephews. He telling me, collecting Pokemon cards, doing more than I did when I was a kid. And it's not even my influence. They're just picking it up on their own. And I was like, wow, okay. It's
a brilliant franchise from the beginning to now. They have just nailed it and knocked it out of the park and maintained, this genuineness. And like, it's something that, it spans many generations. Yeah. I don't think, really, if I'm looking at buying something right now and I'm looking, okay, I could buy some Amazon shares right now, or I could buy some Charizards. It's like, I'm putting my money in Charizards because I don't know. I'm pretty sure people are going to always go back to my daughter one day when she's killing it in life and she has a ton of money, and she's running her own companies and stuff like that. She's probably going to look back at my 1999 PSA 10 Charizard card and she's going to want it.
Yeah. There's a lot of people that want that.
Yes.
That's like the holy grail, man.
Yeah, I got a couple. Not a PSA 10s, but I have a 9.5 BGS, PSA 10. I also am a very big collector of the 96 Japanese base set. I'm trying to amass a PSA 10 set of that.
Wow.
So we actually did a charity event last summer with Steve Aoki and Gary King Pokemon. Gary King Pokemon is one of the biggest collectors, and so we have a podcast actually, Neustreet.com podcast. It's a couple episodes back with Gary King Pokemon.
Okay.
Dude's one of the most fascinating people. I met him in October, and he just is Pokemon, lives and breathes it, hasn't collected it, invested in it, knows everything about it. It's just like he's like a historian. Truly, like. There's other person you mentioned. It's like these people are like historians. It's like, oh, and so so back to the thing we're taught that these things shouldn't have value. These things are fleeting and whatever. It's like, okay, cool. Tell me another story. Why is gold worth anything?
So I take it from that. And one of my questions too was like, you still believe strongly in this in these alternative assets, because the way right now that they are being consumed, I guess, by retail investors anyway, right? And they're great sites like Rally, and you have all these other fractional platforms. It's a way to kind of get some exposure to these assets. But at the same time, like they've come down just like every other, and on our end we see that like they've come down hard, and some of them have come down really hard, and people kind of forgot like this was an investment. There was nothing guaranteed here. And they're kind of upset, not upset, but kind of wondering what is the future of this all, and should I really be putting my money into, this $100,000 bottle of wine, or should I, or whatever? I'm wondering, will the industry outlast whatever it is that's, that we're in the middle of and that might come,
Yeah, 100% yes. Just don't make the mistake. The thing that a lot of people make mistakes on, and I go back to like my art collecting mentality. You have to buy the best. Mm-hmm. You have to buy the best. And you have to understand how many other people could own the same thing that you have. Truly, scarcity matters. You need to look at populations. You need to look at how many things are above. You can't buy something that's a population of 10,000 and expect it to retain value. You just can't do that. So in the card space, you need to buy the best of the best. When you do, and be very mindful of population supplies, because some people control populations, and even big institutional buyers in this space do that. Yeah. So you need to be very careful. But ultimately, when you think about it, you're buying history. You're buying something that like a Michael Jordan rookie card. Okay, Nike, every Jordan brand. Everything that's come from that. Even Space Jam, for God's sakes. Everything like there's all kinds of things have come from this that. It literally started there. And so I don't watch a lot of basketball. I don't watch a lot of football, but I sure as shit do collect culturally relevant things. So for example, my thesis on Colin Kaepernick cards, there's nobody more culturally relevant, that maybe wasn't the most celebrated football player, but, I probably own every single one of his iterations of rookie cards. I look at things from a cultural standpoint, a cultural value, long term. Less so the moment than more so the long term. Think about what that moment meant and what that moment means to people, what the scarcity is. And ultimately, if you're thinking about it that way, then I don't think you can go wrong.
So, I love this, man. So like you're basically, your thesis is that, that Colin Kaepernick and, him kneeling, regardless of what people think, him kneeling during the, the national anthem kind of is, to us, is kind of like similar to maybe say like a John Carlos, right? When he put up his fist.
Yes. 100. That is exactly true. 100% true. I mean, it's and he's still doing it. He's still active. He's an activist. I mean, it's just like, what he's done, his impact on the world is a lot bigger than football. Yeah. And to be honest with you, Michael Jordan's is too. And that's why we collect it. We don't collect it because we do collect it because he was a badass basketball player, right? Of course. But it's more than that. Yeah. Like, it's more than the sport, a lot more than the sport. It has to be, because there's not many people that watch the sport when you look at it. So yeah, no, I look at cultural artifacts is really what I think I really focus on across all things. And you mentioned wine; it's the same thing. I mean, I'm a wine collector as well, and but I'm not buying second tier Bordeaux. If I can't afford the top of the top, I'm not buying it, because it's not. There's no point. When you're buying a bottle of wine, you want to be sitting there 10 years, 20 years, 30 years from now at the table, sitting around and think about how many other people could be ordering the same bottle of wine right now.
Right.
And if your answer is, not many, then it's probably going to go up. People pay for experiences, they pay for culture, but only if it's scarce.
And to be clear, you're talking about investing. Like, if you're a collector, you can buy whatever you want, right? But if you're talking about the investment side of it, right?
No, I'm kind of the same. I mean, ultimately, like, I'm a long-term investor. I'm a collector, long-term investor. I love these things, and shit. When you tell me, I got to sell my wine collection one day, I'm going to be sad. But you got to look at all this stuff through a very much a sophisticated investment lens. Yeah. Even if you're never going to sell it. Again, back to like the whole point is like, my thesis. I start with a thesis, right? The Colin Kaepernick thesis. This was several years ago. And then I get into the math and the numbers, and I get into the data, and I start to look across marketplace. I look at all the population reports, I aggregate them. I look at all the pricing. I look at the history. I look at everything, and then I put it all together in my head, and I sort of make a decision. But when I'm buying these cards, I'm not going out and buying the Topps Chrome unnumbered rookie card. Like, that is not worth money. It won't be worth money in the future. There's thousands of those. Mm-hmm. You have to buy. This is a one of 25 signed prime autograph. Like, it's not, there's only 25 people in the world that can potentially have the same card. And, so you just always got to have a mind towards, you got to understand that all these companies are trying to sell you shit. Right. Right. And if you look at it from that side and start to protect yourself a little bit, not things are as cool and interesting and as scarce as these companies would let you believe. Yeah. You got to do your own diligence.
Great point. I kind of want to talk a little bit more about, and you talk about aggregating data. Right now, you kind of have a, and correct me if I'm wrong, if I'm not correct with the details, APIs, right, available for beta testing on your site. Could you talk about that? What are you developing, and how can people get involved?
We want people to be able to just build cool shit, right? Like, ultimately, like, I like building stuff. I'm a builder. Give me data, I'll figure out something to do with it. And that's kind of what we're doing there. I mean, we ultimately are going to give people the ability to pull freely, a set of API endpoints, that you won't be able to like pull all of our data at once, and we'll have to limit because, it costs money for us as things get communicated. But ultimately, we want you to be able to build things on top of our solutions. And so a couple just random ideas of people that I know that are going to be building things. There's a NFT photography, platform that's being built that's interested in sort of using our data to plumb in some things from the outside of their particular world into their world. But then there's also like, some people that are doing things that are more like back end, like, you're doing valuations or stuff and such. You want to understand what the pricing of this object is across the internet systematically and do some things with it. Basically it's the first version of something that will become more sophisticated, much more sophisticated over time. But we ultimately want our users to drive that sophistication. And so we'll put it out in the wild. We'll let you pull products and prices and, do what you will with them. And then you tell us what you like, what you don't like. We're data people, we're hardcore data people. Yeah. And so if you need another field or you need something else, or otherwise we're, going to try to limit the payloads as much as possible to make it manageable for people. But, let us know what you need to build your applications, and we'll help you build it.
Because like you mentioned on the front end, you guys have a great content site, right? You have your podcast, you have your newsletter, you guys are plugged into like what's relevant culturally. But you're also building now on the back end. You're talking about building, a marketplace essentially, right? Where you can kind
of intentionally a marketplace aggregator, I guess is the point, because and ultimately, when you think about we have this media, we have this platform with this B2C presence, we're establishing credibility, we're establishing awareness. We also feel the need to talk about a lot of these things, because there are a lot of things that as this NFT and digital revolution sort of evolves, we do feel the need to have to sort of help mold the narrative in a lot of cases, because there's just nobody talking about it. And so, I think ultimately we'll do a lot more of that. I've also got an academic partnership with a major U.S. university where I'll be co-authoring a paper on NFTs, in particular their storage mechanisms and, Storj and IPFS and all this other things and relative value. And so real geeky stuff. But ultimately, we're trying to build, awareness on the top end, but then sophistication in the back end. And that sophistication is really what allows this market, and data sophistication really allows this market to evolve from where it is to where it could be. And I ultimately do think that a lot of these things, it's kind of the cart leading the horse. It's like people think these things aren't of value, and therefore they don't build things of value around them. Well, I fundamentally disagree. I think that if you build the sophistication, I think the reason why this market isn't institutionalized in some sense is because it's impossible to do it. Mm-hmm. But that being said, we're at Neustreet, we're not thinking that baseball cards are going to be literally like the future of the world. We recognize that baseball cards are essentially an alternative asset, right? And so a baseball card, a bottle of wine, a piece of fine art, an NFT. If we're really good at the data, the valuations, and all that stuff, we can do a lot of damage across the entirety of the industry, not just these cultural artifacts that we're talking about now.
Awesome. Eric, I want to thank you for your time. We went some places. Learned something new.
Kind of blacked out,
What's that?
No, I just kind of showed up and blacked out. But yeah, for anybody seeing me on video, I was just out cutting the lawn. So, I'm a little sweaty, but excuse the appearance. But no, thanks for having me. And it was an awesome conversation, and we'll have to do it again sometime. Yeah, absolutely. Take care, man. Any way that people can get plugged into Neustreet? What are some things that just real quick? Absolutely. The @real Neustreet, @real Neustreet on Twitter is probably the best. Also, Neustreet.com. Sign up for our newsletters. If you want to beta test our APIs, there's a place to sign up for that. And just don't be a stranger. Either any of those channels. I'm actually in a semi-anonymous CryptoPunk on Twitter, but not really anymore. Doxed. I'm DefianceWorks, @DefianceWorks on Twitter. I talk a lot of crap about NFTs. Follow me too. But yeah, pleasure is all mine. That was a great conversation, getting inside Eric's thought process as a successful collector and a data builder. Right now, Neustreet's finger is on the pulse of pop culture and the emerging alternative assets markets. It is building on top of that to become a giant database where collectors can gather more information to make the best collecting and investment decisions. As someone who has covered NFTs for about a year, his insights on the NFT space were much appreciated. Thanks to Eric for coming on the podcast to talk about Neustreet. And as always, a big thanks to you for listening. If you enjoyed today's episode, please leave a review or follow us on the streaming platform of your choice. Until the next time, take care.